Hello and welcome to the Pivot Point podcast, where we discuss insights, strategies, and industry trends that encourage growth of your business. I'm your host, David Sleepak, and I am thrilled that you're here today. Joining us is Ryan Miller, a business consultant, speaker, and author with more than 20 years of corporate leadership and sales experience. He's going to talk about some of the trends we're seeing unfold in the business space today, like workers returning to the office, employee retention, and of course, inflation. Hey, if you manage a team of people, Ryan's advice on how to genuinely care for your team and how it can shift your business culture will inspire you to lead differently. Hey, before we get started, I want to make sure you're subscribing to our podcast on your preferred streaming platform and following us on social media. Hey, without further ado, let's jump in and talk with Ryan on today's episode. Hey, hello, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Stentam podcast. I'm joined by Ryan Miller, performance coach, business consultant, motivational speaker, and author. With more than 20 years of corporate leadership and sales experience, Ryan helps high performance and industry leaders optimize their growth potential through business strategy, mindset, and human behavior. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today on this podcast. I know we share a passion for helping small businesses and spend a lot of time together focusing our efforts in the healthcare space.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. It's good to be here. Going to be fun.
Yeah, awesome. You know, we have lots of things to discuss today and really focusing in on business owners, small business owners, really. They've been through a lot of challenges over the last several years, from COVID, record inflation, staffing challenges, the list goes on and on. You work with a lot of business owners, a lot of business leaders. What are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing in the business landscape today?
That's like Pandora's box. I think a couple of the challenges that come to mind, I think first is there's just still a lot of uncertainty. Many of the owner or the people that own businesses right now or have run successful businesses, they haven't faced this before. 2008 was the last time that businesses were really devastated. And most people didn't experience that. There's a lot of younger professionals that are owning businesses now. And so when you go through the period that we just did or are kind of still in, it's almost like, are we done? What's coming? What else is there? And so I think uncertainty plays just a big role overall. They weren't prepared for this, which exposed a lot of things, which I'm sure that we can talk about a little bit. So I think that's one. I think another thing that comes to play, and I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but they're trying to figure out how to balance the need to continue to serve the customers the best way they can, win new business as often as they can, and keep a workforce happy that is finding, frankly, every excuse known to man to not be happy with the place that they work. And in many ways are being encouraged to not be happy with the place that they work. We saw kind of through the COVID period, people were just jumping from employer to employer to employer because people were desperate for workers. The employees kind of had the upper hand in what they got paid, how they got paid, where they worked, when they worked. And so employers are really stuck in that tension of like, how do we continue to run our businesses, support our employees, but at the same time not be at their beck and call. And so I think that's been a big challenge for them. And then obviously inside of that, one of the things I said, revenue is just key for everything. And there are a lot of businesses that aren't sure how to recuperate all that they lost. Because again, I feel bad saying this, but the reality of the matter is if you got into business sometime in the early 2000s, towards the beginning of the recession, so 7, 8, you started at the bottom, and then we saw just this incredible spike in business, right? Every single sector of the market started to go on this radical ride up. And So it was easy to be successful. I'm not saying it was easy to build a business. I'm not saying everything was easy, but you were growing over and over again because businesses were starting, businesses were expanding. There was more demand for just about everything out there. And so they only knew how to succeed. And so then when everything came crashing down and they had to start getting strategic around what to do, they didn't know how to do it. And so, again, I think a lot of those things kind of interconnected, but those are some of the things that come to mind when I think about kind of where they're at and what they're trying to think about as they look forward. And how far can you look forward? I mean, again, who knows what's going to happen next? We're not sure if we're in a recession. I think we are. I'm not a financial expert. I'm just looking at what we see. People don't know if it's going to get worse, if this is the worst of it. So I just think that there's so many competing issues that are at play here. And I should say on top of that, they're also a human being themselves, and they've dealt with all their own scars, all their own hurt, all their own frustrations, whether it was somebody got really sick, they lost somebody, they lost something, their business got broken down, they got beat up, their kids were struggling through school. Like there's just so many things that have come into play. And so they're also trying to manage their own life in the process of continuing to build a business.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. It's funny, I own businesses, through the first recession, right, in 2007, 2008. And it's interesting because, we were just shedding jobs, right? But it seemed like then, everyone wanted to work.
Yep.
Right? Like, ugh, I lost my job or I lost my business. And people are like seeking new positions, right? Like,
yep.
Unemployment was through the roof, but people were looking for jobs. And I feel like as I look at the landscape today, there's this like new dynamic almost where, we went through like the great recession of people just, I'm quitting their jobs, right? There was like this mass exodus during COVID of people just like, I'm done, right? I'm out.
Yeah.
And it seems like, from an employee's perspective, that kind of urge or desire for people to be employed, right? Or be very choosy as to where they are employed is a phenomenon that's kind of new, right?
Yeah.
As we're in this kind of new, kind of uncertain economic time. Right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting thing that I'm seeing today.
Yeah, and one thing you said that I want to qualify something that I said, because when I say that employees were calling the shots for a while there, I'm not blaming them completely, because I think that there were two things at play there. There were some bad actors, like there are in everything, but I think there was two things at play there. For a long time, employers were taking advantage of employees. And so I think that in one way, this was the employee's opportunity to take their shot, and sadly, but deservingly so. So I think that was a contributing factor that finally, like, the employee had the advantage again. And so I feel for them there. I think the other thing too is, and I don't want to get like overtly political, but it was enabled. For a lot of people that didn't love their job, that maybe weren't getting paid super well, that were stressed out because they were working crazy hours and couldn't be at home and couldn't see their families. And all of a sudden they were given a financial opportunity to stay home. Who doesn't want that to one degree? We all want some sense of freedom. And so for a lot of people, they found that opportunity for the first time ever and really took advantage of it. And so I think that there is some mentality that needs to change there. But overall, I think it was an understandable place for a lot of people to be. And so, I just think that, again, like, everyone's trying to figure things out. And I think we have an uphill battle ahead of us for sure.
Agreed. Let's take a little bit deeper dive, into the employees and leadership. It seems like it's been exponentially more difficult in kind of this post-pandemic world, if you will, to get remote workers, or this concept of remote work or work from home, right? Yeah. And as you pointed out, right, like, people had this opportunity and almost were enabled. It had an excuse or a financial, opportunity with being funded by the government, right, during the pandemic to be with their family. And a lot of people, enjoyed that, right? Their commute was, putting on a pair of pants, maybe, right, and going downstairs, right?
Yeah, at least a shirt.
And being there, being with their children, what are your thoughts around, there's a lot of things happening in the news and CEOs and people like really around this kind of back to work, like we need to be in the office.
Yeah.
And even this concept of kind of remote workers.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am a career salesperson, and I remember 2007 and a half, probably, when we started to see early signs of the recession happening. I remember a guy I worked for, my boss at the time, came to us and he's like, all right, he goes, you guys need to start showing up here every single day. I want you in the office at 8:30 in the morning, and I want you here as the last thing you do before you leave that day. Well, my office was about 45 minutes to an hour from where I lived, and my territory spanned all in between. So I rarely was in the office, and I was always producing at or near the top of my numbers. Like I always made my number, blah, 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 blah. And so I was appalled at the idea. I'm like, I can do my work from anywhere. I don't need you to tell me when to come in. And so I hated it. And so I was anti in the office forever. And so then fast forward to now, and I think that I, along with a lot of people, are observing a lot of the negative effects of being remote. I do think that, and I empathize with people that need to be with their families, that are really struggling to figure out how to balance being at work and being at home and want some more freedom and flexibility. I don't think that we need to be in person in order to get our work done or even to do a good job. And I think that that's a mistake that organizations are making, is saying in order to do the best job possible, you need to be here. I think most jobs can get done from anywhere, and I think that's been proven. I think what we miss, though, is this collaborative opportunity for us to build relationships together. Previous to COVID, there was this huge, just push to build culture, and everyone was putting ping pong tables in the office. And even here, you guys have an incredible space and so many amenities. But that was where the focus was. It was on let's make it fun and enjoyable, and it should be. But I think the thing that, again, COVID exposed was this need for us to be together, to build human relationships, to collaborate. And so by being remote, you're missing out on those opportunities to bump into somebody in the office. I don't want somebody in my office every second all day, but I want to be able to walk over to you and say, hey, David, what are you working on? Hey, I just worked through this. I just had the sales opportunity and I ran into a challenge. Yes, we can do that over Zoom. Yes, we can do that on the phone, but I just think something's missing. The other thing that I think is missing is that when we face a challenge or when we achieve a mountaintop moment, we really do want to do that with people, right? I mean, nobody wants to suffer alone, and really celebrating alone sucks too. And so by creating that community of relationship, I think that that's so integral. And so I think those are the things that leadership needs to focus on. Is you have an uphill battle. I think you need to be more empathetic to people. I mean, this has been 2.5 years of people being out of the office. And so I think it's going to take a couple of years. And some organizations went from, some big ones, Google and Microsoft, they're like, we're going to be remote forever. And then they said, come back to the office. I don't think you can do that. I just think that's so irresponsible. You got to give people time to turn around how long it took them to turn into it. So I think they need to give them some space to do that. I think that they need to have a better understanding of why people should be in the office, again, versus just work. So those are some of the things that I think are really important for people to be focusing on that are leading businesses, especially as we look to the future of trying to attract and retain employees. What is the reason to come to work? Coming into the office, the good reason is not because I pay you to be here. As a business owner, I say, I pay you to be here, you do what I say. And I think that that's just reasonable. But I think that people need more than that. And I think it's fair to ask, to ask for that of leadership.
I agree 100%. I think that there's this culture that is missing when you're over Zoom, right? There's this collaboration that evaporates, right? Once the camera, right, and the microphone is turned off. And there's those incidentals, right? Like it's when you're getting coffee or, I call it the water cooler effect, right? Where, hey, and it sparks a conversation.
Yep.
It sparks, creativity, right? I'm in marketing, and, a lot of the things that we discover together as a marketing team really starts with, hey, I was thinking about this as we're riding up the elevator, right?
Yeah.
And those are the things that just can't be replicated in, an invite and a Teams meeting and this and that. So I think we're highly aligned in kind of how we're thinking about it, and really the opportunity, right? I mean, we're social beings, right? I mean, we thrive on interaction. And I think I look at my niece and nephew, who are younger, and I mean, they spent, 2 years learning, over a computer.
Yep.
And I mean, social skills, I feel like they just missed social skills, right?
Yeah.
In school. And I mean, now they're kind of catching up to it. And I think we celebrate it. It's funny, as restrictions were lifted, and I mean, what I saw colleagues doing was rushing back to, social experiences or, concerts or places where you're near other people. And I think people, for the most part, want to be near other people. Selling is a relationship-based thing. And if you're not repeating those skills, right, from a relationship perspective, how are you supposed to do that with a customer, right? Yep. So I agree with you, 100% there. It's interesting as we talk about people and teams, building teams, right? A lot of jobs were lost during the pandemic. A lot of people went into different careers, right?
Yep.
Maybe they were a nurse, they got burnt out. Now all of a sudden they're, doing something else, right? So they left the sector. So I'm seeing a lot of holes, right? As I look in different industries. You do work with a ton of business leaders, and I'd love to get your thoughts around, building and ultimately retaining high performance teams.
Yeah. So I think some of the things that I default to are very old school, which is funny because I'm only 45, and sometimes I feel like I talk like a 65-year-old when I say that. But I remember getting into business I think my first real professional job was, I was 20, so 25 years ago. And I remember just this feeling that we want you here, we appreciate you, and we want to invest into your success. And so my first real job, before I even got into sales, outside of like pizza places, I worked for a dry cleaner. I went to work for, and I started my career in the automotive industry, specifically in manufacturing of high-end wheels and tires for cars. And I worked in the warehouse. And for 6 months, I was in that warehouse getting dirty every single day. I was miserable. And I saw these clean people inside the office every day. And the reason I took the job in the first place, because I was into cars. I was racing cars at the time. And so that's why I took the job. But when I saw them, I was like, I want what they have, but I don't know if I have what it takes. Like, I believe I do, but what's it really take to succeed inside there? And so I went to the owners, both of the owners of the company. There were these two South African guys, and I begged them for months. I want a spot. I want a spot. I want a spot. And they finally gave me a crack. And they were so clear in the fact that, like, you're going to come in, you're going to do a good job, we're going to support you. The people around you are here to help you and support you, and you're valued. And because they kind of set an expectation and a standard, but at the same time communicated to me how much they cared about me being there, I felt this desire and want to invest into what was happening. And so I think that foundational principle, which again is going to take a lot of unwinding because companies have been abused, employees have been abused, like there's just been so much mess and brokenness. But I think that's the first thing is, like, if you want to build high performers, you have to care. And you can't care about succeeding in the business. Like, no matter what, I'm a capitalist at heart. I want to make as much money as humanly possible. Businesses don't exist if they don't make money. But I feel like before we even think about making money is thinking about caring about what we do or why we're there, caring about the people that are working for us, caring about the people that we work for, having that, collaborative respect, caring about the work that we do, caring about the people that we're serving. And so I think that's where that foundation starts, is like having that kind of culture of where we're really here to do meaningful work. And that can be in any sector. I had an employee come to me one time that worked in the company I did years ago, and she was like, "This is so dumb. Like, sales is always a celebrated team. They're the ones out there slaying the dragons, and here I am just punching keys on a keyboard." And I said, "Do you this was actually in the insurance industry, and I said, "Do you understand how integral your job is to what we do?" And she's like, "No." And I said, "No. If your piece of the puzzle isn't there, they never celebrate, because we can't deliver on what we promise. If your piece of the puzzle isn't there, the end user can't get the care that they need when they're super sick or in need of." And she started to have this huge perspective change. And so again, like, I think that's so important. And then I think then we start to layer upon high performers. There is this natural desire for people to succeed, but ultimately people perform at a high level when they have a vision for what they want in the future and can connect the organization's vision to theirs.
That makes a ton of sense. The caring piece, right? I mean, it really defines being motivated.
Yeah.
Right. It really defines that relationship of how people want to feel cared for.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
If a customer feels like they're being cared for, they're likely to be a very loyal customer.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And as I look at my career, in leadership and whatnot, right, like, people perform when they feel cared for.
Yep.
And they reciprocate.
Yep.
Right. So I think that reciprocal relationship, any long-term relationship is one where everybody wins. And,
Yep.
and I think even beyond that winning piece is where everyone feels like they're being taken care of.
Yep.
The company, the leadership, the employees are being taken care of. And it's funny, right? As we talk about caring, and you and I have spent a lot of time together kind of in the healthcare industry, right? Which is pretty funny, that we're having this conversation around caring.
Yeah. Well, and before you go, I just want to say this, like, I want to be super careful, because that idea of like, I care about people, it's very obvious in the sense that, of course, I care about people, but it's also very soft, right? It's like, but where's the metric there? And so I think that's, again, a challenge that leaders are going to face is, so how do I measure that? And how do I demonstrate that? Do I pay them more? Do I put flowers on their desk every single day? Like, what does that mean? And so I think one of the things that's super important, so I love organizations that invest into their team's development around, they'll do personality assessments, skills assessments. So Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finder, the Enneagram has become really big now. I think those things are all super helpful for a lot of different reasons as it relates to how you develop them. But I think one thing that companies don't spend enough time doing, and I wish they spent more of, was actually getting to know their employees and what their employees actually care about. Like,
interesting.
Tell me a little bit about your story. Like, what got you here? What is your vision for the future for yourself? And how can I help you get there? I'm not telling you that, if you want to buy a Ferrari, that working here is going to get you your Ferrari. But if in some way I can help to influence or impact your ability to achieve your vision, which will ultimately bring you joy and fulfillment, that's what people start to connect and care about. Again, it's just like in sales. In sales, they have a problem to solve, but it's not the solution to the problem that they're really after. They're what's after on the other side. It's the ability to grow their business. It's the ability to serve their customers better. It's whatever it is. And so when I can understand the other side of the problem solution and get to what the outcome does for them, that's when I can win more sales. Same thing applies in the organization. And so I feel like performance reviews, which should not only be done once a year, but should be done on a weekly, quarterly basis at the very least. And you've got to be careful, obviously, because of HR and compliance and things like that, but take more time to understand why your people are there, what they're after, what they're trying to accomplish in life. I mean, another thing, it's interesting, sorry to go off on this tangent, but I'm coaching two sales professionals right now for this global tech firm that's back east. And I started just doing leadership development training for the organization. And now I've been tasked with kind of helping them with problem employees. But the employees aren't necessarily the problem. It's the employees are facing problems, and I'm there to kind of help them overcome them. And one employee specifically, she was this high-performing individual. She was crushing it in a sales role. They moved her into a new sales role, and all of a sudden she started to struggle. And she can't hit her number. And they don't know what to do. They've tried everything that they think is possible, and they can't get too deep into the weeds with her because they can't cross that kind of barrier of personal and professional. And so they had this idea to hire a kind of a mental health and well-being person that's full-time in the office. And they're like, anything you guys need, if you're struggling outside of work, go to them. So you'd think that that woman would go into that office, but she won't because she's too afraid because people are going to see that she's got a problem. And so she was stuck and not knowing her way out of it. So they reached out to me. I start spending some time with this woman and come to find out she's got a ton of personal challenges that are hindering her ability to be able to show up to work every single day. Then when she shows up to work and she doesn't do a good job, it's magnifying the problems she has in her home life. And so until you fix that root cause and she can be somewhat on a better path there, she's never going to show up and do what you need to do for her. And so they're losing out on a high performer because they can't reach something that's kind of outside their purview. Now we're starting to solve that problem, and this woman is turning around. It's been 45 days. And it's not me that's fixed the problem. It's just me helping to uncover what was at the root cause and how together we can collaborate around fixing that. So again, it's like, understand what people care about, understand what they're challenged with, figure out ways together how to overcome that. Bigger companies are going to have a harder time doing that. But again, like those things are going to be the key. Because if people know that you truly care about what they want and where they're challenged, they will be in it with you forever.
There's some particular tools or things that you've used. Obviously, a small company, 3, 4, 5. I mean, it's very family oriented. Typically, it's a direct line to the leader, the business owner, the entrepreneur, whoever. Yep. Right. As we start to go up market, if you will, and scale that, right?
Yep.
There's a 50 employee company or 100 life company. What do you say to those leaders, right, within those organizations, to kind of help facilitate, these things in a meaningful way? Performance reviews or reviews, checking in with people, one-to-ones. Are there any other tools that you found successful?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are some other assessment type tools that are available, but I don't think that anything takes the place of just personal conversation. One-to-one meetings are typically places that are held for here's your metrics, here's where you're doing well, here's where you're not, and that's okay. But I think that those meetings need to be more about actual what a one-to-one conversation should be. Like, how are you? Where are you at? What's your own personal goal for the week? And people are like, oh, well, I want to hit my number. It's like, no. What about at home? Is there a vacation you're looking forward to? Are there other things that you're trying to do? So I think that if we build into that, and it's going to take time, right? Building into that level of trust and understanding. And if a leader is not equipped, which a lot aren't, and that's okay, if they're not equipped or skilled to do that, then I would say that find somebody that is. Go to somebody outside your organization that is a colleague or a peer that you can have come in and act as that mentor or support. Or you can. I mean, like a lot of organizations, and this isn't a plug, this is just the reality. Like that's a lot of what I'm able to do in organizations is just going outside to bring somebody in. Like I'm objective. I don't care what the organization's goals are. I care about that person and helping that person to perform at a high level because then they'll achieve the goals. And so I think that those are the resources that need to be tapped into a little bit more and aren't. And if you don't, that will end up being a big part of your demise. I mean, it's crazy, David. Like most of the people that I work with at the higher level, one-to-one in terms of like when they hire a performance coach, these are executives that are making hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a year. The number one thing that's holding them back from further success is their own view of themselves. There's just something inside of them that's been broken, distorted, blurry, and they can't figure it out. And it takes somebody outside of them to help them see that. And so again, I think it's the same thing for employees. It's like, get outside of that, understand what those things are, and help them work through those things so you can get them to where they want to go.
It's interesting. Yeah. Perspective maybe, and looking at things from different angles.
Yep.
Right. And oftentimes, internally or self-reflection is hard, right?
Yep.
Because you're typically looking at it from one particular angle.
Absolutely.
And it's funny when you have little kids and they're crawling around on the ground, and then you get down on the ground and you see things, right?
Yeah.
Like from their perspective, right? Or I play with my dog, and I see things like, what's he looking at?
Yeah.
And put myself in his shoes, if you will, or
Yep.
pause. It's very interesting, when you look at things from a different perspective.
Totally.
Yeah, really, really makes a lot of sense. One kind of final question or thought process. We've spent a lot of time together talking about the healthcare business and employee benefits. You talked a little bit about caring, even resources, if you will.
Yeah.
Self-reflection, et cetera, et cetera. Are there specific strategies or things that you found are successful around benefits or perks or things that make a lot of sense in that world, specifically around some of the challenges we've talked about earlier today around recruiting and building teams and retaining those folks, especially in kind of a pretty challenging hiring environment today, right? Lots of things at play there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of a broken record because, again, I feel like we need to do a better job of just asking questions of what people want. So as an employer, myself, I think about I have one full-time employee, a couple of contractors, but my one full-time employee, she is a young mom of 2 kids. She is an incredible professional. Like if she committed all of her time to a career, she could crush it in so many different places. She does an incredible job for me, even managing 2 kids at home. And she's got a very supportive husband, and he has a great job. But it's like, for her, like, I want her to show up and do the best job possible, to help me generate more revenue, to support our clients. She deals with all my client engagement. She does a lot of administrative work, creative work, all these things. So it's like, I need her to do all those things. But the number one way that I get her to do that, other than her own will to want to do that, is to support her in what she wants. And so it's funny when I was saying earlier, like remote work in the office, she lives 4 houses down from me. Our office is 100 yards from our house. It is a separate building, but 100 yards from our house. And she comes into the office a couple days a week for a couple hours, and we check in. And outside of that, frankly, I don't care what she does. And that to her right now is worth more than any amount of money. Like, she gets paid decently well, but that's worth more money to her than anything. Like, she needs to run her kid to the doctors, or she needs to take one of them to swim lessons, or her youngest is just about to be a year old, and she brings the baby into the office every single time. And we spend time, sometimes strategizing business, sometimes talking about life. Sometimes I'm just holding that cute, adorable little baby and enjoying my 1 hour with her, and then knowing I can give her back. But it's like, that's what matters to her, And so I want to get our work done, but I want to lean into that stuff too. And so I think that is extremely important for organizations. I think another thing in terms of benefits is what are you doing to invest into your team's overall development? So as an individual and as a team, if there are any investments into development, it's typically around a product or a service that you're selling. Like, we're going to do training on a rollout of a new product or a new, like, what about their ability to just be more time efficient, or their ability to, produce a better end product, or converse with people to be a better communicator and build. So those are some of the things that I used to see being done a lot and aren't now. Another thing that I think is and this is like all the buzz, but with AI becoming such an incredible tool, I think that companies need to invest more, not into AI, though they do, but into their people learning how to implement AI into the work that they do. I mean, could you imagine if you had, 20 employees, and you could do 3 times the amount of work with that same 20 employees? Well, right now, what people are thinking is, I'm going to replace my 20 employees I'm going to cut it down to 7 so I can do the work of 20 people with 7, and I'm going to use AI for the rest. I'm like, why wouldn't you teach those 20 people how to implement AI into what they're doing day in and day out so you can do 3 times the work? And use AI for all the skills that are non-relational. And so then you can have your time or your people spending the most time with people being the human beings that they were created to be in the first place. So I think that's a really cool opportunity that's coming. Like, there's so much scare, even in the workforce, with you're going to be replaced with AI, so you better work or else. I'm like, dude, why don't leaders of organizations start investing more into teaching their people how to use it?
I think that's a really cool strategy, and again, perspective and looking at that technology, right? And I feel the same way. It's an enhancer, right? It's a tool. It's no different than the personal computer 50 years ago, where it just creates a more efficient worker, and one that is better equipped. But AI will never replace the human element.
No,
right? Like, people buy things, people do things because of relationships, right?
Yep.
And I think if we lose that core functionality, right, and focus so much on the technology, you miss out on a huge opportunity. I mean, people aren't going to be replaced, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
That's robots and this and that. So, and I know that because we like interaction. We like social interaction. We thrive on that. So no one wants to talk to a computer, really.
Yeah.
They want to be enhanced by it, make it more intuitive, right? But not replace. So
yeah, and I think one of the cool things, at least in theory right now, and I could end up being wrong because, again, I'm no complete expert in this, but all of the technology advancements in the past have actually ended up burdening employees more than benefited them, in the sense of, like, when laptops became all the thing, well, then they just gave an employee a laptop and then said, now you can work from anywhere all the time. When email became a thing, I mean, nobody has boundaries around email. So now employees are feeling like they have to check email at freaking 10 o'clock at night, whatever. Whereas I think that this could be, for the first time in a long time, again, if it's handled appropriately, I think AI could become a benefit to the employee too. Because, again, I don't want to say I'm giving you the opportunity to learn how to do this. I'm going to invest this time or whatever so you can do 3 times the work. What I want to do is really find an efficient balance between, I want to take some of the burden off of you, just like benefits professionals do by implementing technology for other things. I want to take some of the burden off of you, and I want to help you to create more work. So, and if we create more work by you doing just your job the way you do it with some AI enhancements, now you're going to get paid more because now the company's making more money. And so I'm going to reinvest that into you. Not in joke ways like, pretend things, but I'm actually going to pay you more money because now you're producing more work. So I think that could be a really cool dual benefit, in the sense that employers and companies could get more effective and more efficient in how they deliver, which means they could do more work. I think that for employees, I think that could reduce some of the burden. And on top of that, I think it's cool, right? So many people are really interested in this whole idea and concept of what's coming. And so for most people, if you went to them and said, hey, you guys, we've been doing some research and we believe that AI could be an incredible enhancement. And the way that we're going to show you that this isn't to replace you, but to actually benefit you, is we're going to enroll you into some of these courses to show you how you can leverage this in your own role. I mean, that'd be like, really? You're not going to replace me with AI? You're going to actually make me better? That'd be amazing. So I just think there's programs like that. I think those are some of the small perks and benefits. There's a lot of other cool stuff that's out there, but I think this thing is more lasting, because even the financial benefits, student loan repayment stuff, or other like financial benefits, I think those are cool and those are there. But I think this is like, if you teach me how to use AI, even if we part ways one day because I want to grow and move on, or because you don't want me there, whatever, now I've got this additional tool in my tool belt that I can leverage to go use somewhere else.
Sure.
And so I think that that's super cool.
Very insightful. Very insightful. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for spending some time with us here in Phoenix today. I hope everyone listening to the podcast found some of these things valuable in their own businesses.
Yeah.
Any parting words for our audience this podcast?
No, I think that, anytime that I always think about consuming information, so a podcast, a video, even just in the questions that we talked about, there's a lot said. And so I would say pick one thing. I just always think that that's just a great practice to take away, is if there was one interesting thing in the midst of everything that was said, I think really lean into that and figure out how to leverage that. Because for all of us, it's about getting 1% better every single day. It's not trying to overhaul everything all at once.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it.